I never expected to find 3 leather-clad bikers surrounding my terrified teenage daughter when I pulled into our driveway that Tuesday afternoon. But that's exactly what happened when our HOA crossed the line from petty harassment to dangerous intimidation. Those bikers had no idea who they were dealing with, or that their lives would change forever in just 3 minutes. How far would you go to protect your child when strangers threaten them on your own property? After serving 22 years as an Army Ranger, I thought I'd finally found peace in Pinecrest Estates. This was supposed to be my sanctuary, a place where I could finally be present for my daughter Emma after missing too much of her childhood during 6 combat tours. My modest farm was everything I dreamed about during those long nights in foreign deserts. I'm James Richardson, former colonel with the 75th Ranger Regiment. Most people in Pinecrest Estates just know me as Jim from Lot 44, the quiet guy with the 5-acre property at the end of Maple Drive. I bought this place 3 years ago when I retired from active duty. The property was perfect. Enough land for Emma's 4-H projects, a workshop where I could finally pursue woodworking, and most importantly, distance from the chaos that had defined most of my adult life. When I first moved in, the Homeowners Association seemed reasonable enough. Monthly meetings were short, fees were manageable, and the rules made sense for maintaining property values. People minded their own business, which suited me perfectly. After coordinating high-stakes missions across hostile territories, I welcomed the predictable rhythm of civilian life. Everything changed when Todd Mercer took over as HOA president 2 years ago. He'd moved in from some corporate job in the city, bringing big ideas about community transformation and property value optimization. Within months, he transformed our once-friendly community into his personal kingdom, complete with arbitrary rule changes and aggressive enforcement. It started small, citations for mailbox height being 2 inches too tall, lawn length exceeding 3.5 inches instead of the previously acceptable 4 inches. People grumbled but complied. I fixed my mailbox and kept my grass shorter, figuring it wasn't worth the fight. The real trouble began when I publicly questioned the $500,000 Community Improvement Fund at the quarterly meeting. 8 months of increased HOA fees had passed with no visible improvements anywhere in the neighborhood. Where exactly has this money gone? I asked, pointing to the financial statement showing substantial disbursements to vaguely named consulting companies. The membership deserves a detailed accounting before approving another increase. The room fell silent. Nobody had challenged Mercer publicly before. His face turned deep red as he adjusted his expensive tie. Some people don't understand proper chain of command, he snapped, glaring directly at me. Financial management is handled by the executive committee, not open for debate by individual members. Several board members shifted uncomfortably, but nobody spoke up. I'd seen this dynamic before in corrupt regions overseas, one strong personality intimidating others into silence. The next day, Emma's 4-H chicken project, her chance at a college scholarship, suddenly violated community guidelines. Never mind that our property was explicitly zoned for agricultural use when I purchased it, or that the County Agricultural Extension Office had approved her project months earlier. The letter arrived by certified mail. Notice of violation. Unauthorized livestock presence on residential property. It demanded removal of all animals within 48 hours or fines of $100 per day would be assessed. Emma was devastated. She'd spent months researching heritage breed chickens, building the coop to exact specifications, and documenting every aspect of their care. Her project focused on sustainable small-scale farming, precisely the kind of initiative that could win the scholarship she needed for veterinary school. I filed the proper appeals, submitted the agricultural zoning documentation, and requested a hearing. The response was a second violation notice, this one claiming the chicken coop's design violated architectural guidelines. Then came complaints about excessive visitor vehicles when Emma's 4-H group met at our house. First came warning letters, then escalating fines, then property liens. Each time I addressed one issue, 2 more appeared. It became obvious this wasn't about rules. It was about making our lives difficult enough that we'd give up and move. But what happened next crossed a line I never imagined possible in America. Last Tuesday started like any other day. Emma left for school while I spent the morning in my workshop finishing a display case for her upcoming presentation. Around noon, I headed to Walker's Hardware for additional supplies to reinforce the chicken coop. Emma had texted that she was coming home early to work on her project. The spring air felt good as I loaded lumber and hardware into my truck. Old Mrs. Walker checked me out herself, commenting on the chicken wire. "Those birds of Emma's still causing trouble with that HOA fellow?" she asked, shaking her head. "Nothing we can't handle," I assured her, not wanting to involve others in our problems. As I turned into our long driveway 20 minutes later, my heart stopped. 3 men on Harleys were parked in front of our barn. Their motorcycles, custom choppers with matte black finishes and chromed engines, were positioned to block the path to our house. And there was Emma, backed against the chicken coop, clutching her project notebook to her chest. Her bright yellow t-shirt stood in stark contrast to their black leather vests as one of them jabbed his finger toward her face. "Time your daddy learned about following rules," the largest one snarled, standing too close to my daughter. "Fancy chickens or not, when the HOA says animals go, they go." Emma's eyes met mine, pure terror. I'd seen that same look in villages overseas when civilians encountered armed threats. Those men had no idea what that look ignited in me. I parked my truck deliberately, leaving the engine running. Before exiting, I reached into the glove compartment and activated my property security system remotely, a precaution I'd installed after the first threatening letter from the HOA. Every camera around our property was now recording. I noticed the distinctive patches on their leather vests immediately. Iron serpents. Even in civilian life, I'd heard about this particular motorcycle club, hired muscle known for solving problems across 3 counties. They weren't full-fledged outlaws like some of the nationally known clubs, but they operated in that gray area between intimidation and outright criminality. Then I spotted a black Cadillac Escalade parked down the street, just at the edge of my property line. Behind the wheel sat Todd Mercer, his phone clearly raised and recording the scene. This wasn't random. This was calculated intimidation with the HOA president as director. I approached carefully, measuring each step just as I'd done on countless operations. Old habits never die. My mind automatically cataloged threats, positions, and tactical options. 3 subjects. The leader, approximately 6 feet 2 inches, 240 pounds. Right-handed, no visible weapons but wearing boots with reinforced toes. The second, shorter but muscular, sleeve tattoos, constantly scanning surroundings, probably ex-military or law enforcement. The third, younger, nervous energy, hand repeatedly touching his waistband, possibly armed. "Gentlemen, that's my daughter you're speaking to," I called out, my voice calm but carrying across the yard. "She's 16. I'll ask you once to step away from her." Emma's shoulders relaxed slightly at the sound of my voice, but she remained frozen in place. Their laughter echoed across my property. The leader turned, sizing me up with a dismissive glance. I was dressed in a simple green t-shirt and jeans, just another middle-aged homeowner in his eyes. "Well, look who finally showed up," he announced, grinning to reveal a gold tooth. "We've been having a nice chat with your daughter about property regulations." He took a step toward me, intentionally imposing. I didn't move. "We know exactly who you are, old man," he chuckled, nudging his companions. "Jim Richardson, Lot 44, 3 warnings and 7 violations in the past 2 months. HOA bylaws are clear about livestock. We're just delivering a friendly message about those chickens." The tallest biker moved between Emma and the house, effectively cutting off her escape route. "The girl stays until we're done explaining things," he said. "Wouldn't want there to be any misunderstandings about the consequences of continued non-compliance." The youngest one laughed nervously. "Yeah, accidents happen to chickens all the time. Foxes, raccoons, motorcycles." I felt something shift inside me, a familiar clarity I hadn't experienced since my last deployment. The world slowed down. Sounds sharpened. Options crystallized. "I think there's been a misunderstanding," I said evenly, taking another step forward. "This property is zoned agricultural by the county. The HOA has no jurisdiction over approved agricultural projects. Now, I'll say it one more time. Step away from my daughter. The leader smirked and pulled a folded document from his vest pocket. See, that's where you're wrong. New HOA bylaws, special amendment passed last month. Says right here that all previous zoning exceptions are subject to board review. He waved the paper without letting me see it properly. Board reviewed your situation and decided those birds need to go. Today. You work for the HOA officially? I asked, already knowing the answer. The three men exchanged amused glances. Let's just say we're community compliance specialists. The leader replied. We help people understand their civic responsibilities. I nodded slowly. And does this type of specialist work usually involve intimidating minors while their parents aren't home? The atmosphere tensed. The leader's smirk faded slightly. Nobody's intimidating anybody. We're having a conversation about rules. Just want to make sure the message gets through clearly this time. I took another measured step forward. 20 feet between us now. Message received. Now leave my property. We're not finished here, the leader stated flatly. HOA President Mercer wants those chickens gone by sundown, or your fines triple. And trust me, buddy, that's just the beginning of your problems. 22 years of ranger operations teaches you a peculiar kind of calm. Not the absence of fear, but complete clarity within it. Time slows, options clarify, training takes over. I'd encountered men like these before, bullies who mistake kindness for weakness, who only understand power and fear. The problem was they had no idea what real power looked like. It wasn't loud. It wasn't showy. Real power was controlled, precise, and absolute when unleashed. Emma, I said in a voice she hadn't heard before, my command voice from years leading men in combat situations. Go inside and call Sheriff Reynolds. Now. My daughter recognized the tone immediately. She straightened up and tried to move toward the house, but the lead biker stepped into her path, grabbing her arm. We're not finished here, sweetheart, he said, fingers visibly tightening around her wrist. Your daddy needs to understand the seriousness of the situation. That was his fatal mistake. You have exactly 5 seconds to release my daughter, I said, my voice dropping to a register that had once directed elite soldiers through life-or-death situations. 5. Something in my eyes made him hesitate, a glimpse of what lurked beneath the surface of the quiet homeowner. 4. His grip on Emma's arm relaxed slightly. 3. He released her completely, confusion replacing arrogance. 2. Emma slipped past him and ran toward the house. 1. All three men were now fully focused on me, suddenly uncertain about the situation they'd created. The dynamic had shifted, though they didn't yet understand why. I reached for my phone, dialing with one hand while maintaining unbroken eye contact with the leader. The younger biker nervously glanced toward their motorcycles, clearly calculating an exit strategy. What are you going to do? Call the cops? The leader scoffed, attempting to regain control of the situation. By the time they get out here, we'll be long gone. And we'll be back, buddy. Count on it. I didn't respond to him. Instead, I spoke clearly into the phone when the line connected. Sierra Tango 7, authorization Crimson Delta. I stated with precise military cadence. Visual confirmation, 3 Iron Serpents. Current location, immediate containment. A professional voice responded immediately. Authorization confirmed. Colonel Richardson. Assets dispatched. 3-minute ETA. The leader's face drained of color as he registered both my identity and the implications of what he'd just heard. Wait, Colonel Richardson? The Colonel Richardson. It took exactly 3 minutes from the moment they first threatened my daughter. 3 minutes for them to transform from intimidating thugs to men with their hands raised, genuine fear in their eyes. Sir, please terminate the call, the leader begged, actual fear in his eyes. We didn't know this was your property. The second biker, the one I'd pegged as ex-military, was already backing toward his motorcycle. Doyle, we need to leave. Now, this guy is... I know who he is. The leader Doyle hissed, cutting him off. Everybody in our world knows that name. The third and youngest biker had actual tears forming. Please, sir, we weren't told who lived here. We were just hired to deliver a message. Doyle dropped to his knees, hands clearly visible. Colonel, please. Whatever you think is coming, we don't want any part of it. Just let us ride out of here. You put hands on my 16-year-old daughter, I stated flatly. That option expired 3 minutes ago. The sound of approaching vehicles caused all 3 men to flinch. 2 black Suburbans with tinted windows turned into my driveway, moving with precision to block any escape route. The younger biker actually whimpered. Sir, I just got out on parole, he pleaded. I can't go back inside. You should have thought about that before threatening a minor, I replied, unmoved. I kept the phone line open, letting them hear every word of my conversation. Confirmed 3 subjects, 1 with direct contact with the minor. Full documentation protocol in effect. The lead biker, Doyle, was visibly shaking now. It was just supposed to scare her, he blurted out. Just make your family uncomfortable enough to consider moving. That's all Mercer wanted. Too late, I replied, watching the Suburbans position themselves strategically around my property. You put hands on my daughter. 4 men in tactical gear emerged from the vehicles, moving with the coordinated efficiency that only comes from years of specialized training. They weren't wearing any agency identifiers, but their equipment and movement patterns spoke volumes about their background. Colonel, the lead operative nodded respectfully as he approached. I recognized Mike Dawson, who'd served under my command during 3 deployments. Perimeter secure. Doyle was sweating profusely now. Listen, we can explain everything. Mercer paid us $2 grand to run you out of the neighborhood. Said you were causing problems, blocking progress, asking too many questions about the finances. We didn't know who you were. Mike raised an eyebrow at me. Mercer? That the HOA president you mentioned last month. I nodded. Apparently he's outsourcing enforcement now. The Iron Serpents have been on federal radar for months, I said, turning back to Doyle. Task Force 121 has been building a RICO case against your club for intimidation, extortion, and racketeering across 3 counties. Interesting coincidence that you'd show up at my door. Their eyes widened as understanding dawned. After retiring from the Rangers, I hadn't fully left public service. My security consulting firm worked closely with the FBI's Organized Crime Task Force, particularly focused on outlaw motorcycle clubs involved in intimidation and racketeering schemes targeting vulnerable communities. I'd been feeding information to the task force for months, though I'd never expected the case to literally arrive in my front yard. The rumble of more engines announced the arrival of additional unmarked vehicles blocking both ends of my driveway. 4 more men in tactical gear deployed efficiently, all former members of my Ranger team who'd transitioned to federal agencies after their service. Doyle collapsed to his knees. I swear I didn't know who you were, Colonel. Nobody told us this property belonged to you. The second biker, the one with the tactical awareness, suddenly spoke up. Sir, I served in the 10th Mountain. Nothing like your outfit, but I respected what you Rangers did for us in Kandahar. I never would have come here if I'd known. We were just told it was an easy intimidation job. The youngest biker was openly crying now. I just got out on parole last month, he pleaded. Please, sir, I'll tell you everything Mercer's been doing. Names, dates, everything. Don't send me back inside. Down the street, Mercer's Escalade engine roared to life. Through my security systems app, I watched him prepare to flee the scene. A 3rd tactical vehicle appeared from around the corner, boxing him in. 2 operatives approached his vehicle, 1 on each side. Your employer seems to be attempting a hasty departure, I commented, showing Doyle my phone screen with the live security feed. His face contorted with a mixture of fear and betrayal as he realized Mercer was trying to abandon them. That son of a... He swore this was sanctioned by the county, said you were violating ordinances and we were just helping enforce local regulations. Told us you were some troublemaker retiree who didn't respect authority. The irony of that last statement wasn't lost on anyone present. Mike approached me with a tablet. Sir, we've got Mercer's vehicle contained. Agent Ramirez is requesting guidance on how you want to proceed. I glanced at the three bikers, then at the security feed showing a visibly panicked Mercer being removed from his Escalade. Full protocol, I decided. This goes beyond HOA harassment now. If they're using organized intimidation tactics here, they're likely doing it elsewhere too. Sheriff Reynolds arrived 15 minutes later, his patrol car crunching over the gravel driveway. We'd served together during my second deployment to Afghanistan. He'd been military police before retiring and returning to his hometown to serve as county sheriff. "Got your message," he said, eyeing the three bikers now sitting handcuffed on my lawn. "Didn't expect a reunion quite like this." He surveyed the scene, federal agents securing the property, the bikers' motorcycles being loaded onto a transport vehicle, and Todd Mercer sitting in the back of an unmarked car, his face a mask of outrage and fear. "What exactly happened here, Jim?" Reynolds asked, his official tone belied by the slight smile tugging at his lips. "My comprehensive security system, installed after the first threatening letter from the HOA, had captured everything in high definition. We gathered in my home office, where I displayed the footage on multiple screens." Reynolds whistled as he watched Mercer directing the bikers from his Escalade. Then the confrontation with Emma, and finally my arrival. "Been trying to connect Mercer to something concrete for months," he confessed. "Half the complaints against him mysteriously disappear from our system. Now I see why." Emma joined us, composed but still shaken. She pointed to the screen showing Mercer's Escalade. "He's been driving past our property multiple times every day for weeks, Dad. I didn't want to worry you, but I started keeping track in my project journal." She retrieved her notebook, flipping to a section where she'd meticulously documented dates, times, and descriptions. Reynolds shook his head in admiration. "You've got your father's attention to detail, young lady." Agent Ramirez, the FBI lead, entered with a tablet. "We've downloaded data from their phones. I think you'll find this interesting." He showed me a text conversation between Mercer and Doyle. Mercer: "Make them fear for their safety but keep it deniable. Need that property vacated by end of month." Doyle: "What about the kid?" Mercer: "Use her. Parents do anything when their kids are scared." My jaw tightened. Reynolds noticed and placed a steadying hand on my shoulder. "We've got him, Jim. This is textbook intimidation and conspiracy." In the living room, Doyle was desperate for a deal. With 10 federal agents and the county sheriff on scene, the gravity of his situation had fully sunk in. "We've done this to 3 other families this month," he volunteered without prompting. "The Wilsons on Oak Ridge, old couple, wouldn't sell their corner lot. The elderly couple on Pine Street who complained about the road repaving contract. And the Hispanic family on Meadowlark who questioned the water bill increase." He described a systematic neighborhood cleansing plan that targeted specific homeowners who either occupied strategically valuable properties or had challenged Mercer's authority. "Mercer has this whole map," Doyle continued, desperately trying to provide valuable information. "Properties marked in different colors based on whether they need to be convinced to sell or just intimidated into silence. He called it community optimization. What emerged was breathtaking in its corruption. After intimidating families into selling, Mercer's brother's development company, Meridian Properties, purchased each property at below-market rates. Meanwhile, the HOA had been issuing no-bid contracts to companies that kicked back percentages to Mercer's private consulting firm, Pinecrest Solutions. "He specifically wanted your 5 acres for the new community center project," Doyle explained. "Said it would increase everybody's property values by 20%, but really, his brother's company had already drawn up plans to build luxury condos that would connect to the golf course next door." My security cameras revealed something else disturbing. Mercer had been surveilling my property for weeks. The system had archived footage of his vehicle passing by at regular intervals, sometimes stopping to photograph the house and barn. In one particularly disturbing clip, he could be seen directing another man to place something near our mailbox. Reynolds immediately dispatched deputies to inspect the area, where they discovered a small tracking device magnetically attached to the mailbox post. "This goes way beyond HOA overreach," Reynolds said, his expression darkening. This is criminal harassment, conspiracy, and possibly attempted real estate fraud. Agent Ramirez nodded in agreement. We're going to need search warrants for Mercer's residence, his office at the HOA, and his brother's development company. Reynolds couldn't hide his satisfaction. I've been trying to nail this corruption for years. Nobody would talk. Everyone was too afraid of what might happen to their property values or afraid of becoming the next target. 2 days later, over 200 neighbors gathered in my barn for an emergency town hall. People who had barely spoken to each other now stood shoulder to shoulder, united in their shock and outrage. I'd constructed the barn to be convertible for community events, something I dreamed about during deployments, thinking about ways to create the sense of village cohesion I'd witnessed in functional communities overseas. Ironic that it took a threat to bring that vision to life. The Wilsons, an elderly couple who had mysteriously decided to move to Florida last month, returned for the meeting. Mrs. Wilson, a retired school teacher, broke down explaining how bikers had frightened their grandchildren during a visit, making threatening comments until they felt unsafe in their own home. We'd lived there for 37 years, Mr. Wilson said, his voice breaking. Raised our children there. But after those men showed up 3 times in 1 week, our grandchildren were too afraid to visit. What choice did we have? One by one, neighbors came forward with similar stories. The Garcias from Meadowlark Lane described receiving daily inspection notices for imaginary violations, culminating in a visit from men who advised them that certain neighborhoods are just more comfortable for certain types of people. Martin Chun, a recently elected board member, admitted that financial documents had been kept from most of the board. Whenever I asked questions, Mercer would say that detailed reviews would just bog down community progress. Now I understand why. Emma surprised me by asking to speak. She'd always been quiet in groups, preferring the company of her animals and books to large gatherings. Standing before the crowd, my 16-year-old daughter showed more courage than I'd seen in some combat veterans. They thought they could scare us because we lived alone, she said, her voice gaining strength with each word. They calculated that a teenage girl and her dad would be easy targets. But they didn't realize that when you threaten one of us, you threaten all of us. We're not just property owners, we're neighbors. We're a community, and we won't be bullied anymore. The room erupted in applause. I felt a surge of pride watching her stand tall, refusing to be defined as a victim. Local news stations arrived as federal agents executed search warrants, escorting Mercer from his home in handcuffs. His carefully constructed facade crumbled as reporters captured his arrest. The story quickly expanded beyond local news when connections to similar schemes in neighboring counties emerged. After the formal meeting concluded, people lingered, exchanging contact information and forming impromptu committees. I offered my security expertise to neighbors, showing them simple measures to protect their properties: cameras, motion sensors, proper lighting. Things that had become second nature to me but were revelations to many. It's not about creating a fortress, I explained to a group gathered around my security monitors. It's about awareness and basic documentation. Most intimidation relies on there being no record of what actually happened. The biker's detailed testimony exposed a network extending beyond Mercer to include 2 county officials who had facilitated the scheme by burying complaints and fast-tracking permits for Meridian properties. A forensic audit revealed $645,000 in misappropriated HOA funds over 3 years, money that had built Mercer's lake house rather than improving our community. When the Garcia family who had been forced out returned to look at buying back their home, now owned by Mercer's brother's company, the community spontaneously organized a fundraiser to help with their legal fees. Something powerful was happening. A divided neighborhood finding common purpose in justice. I've lived here 15 years, my neighbor David remarked. And this is the first time I've known half these people's names. Shame it took something like this to bring us together. I nodded, understanding completely. Sometimes the strongest bonds are forged in response to a threat. The real test will be what we build now. The state prosecutor ultimately brought 27 criminal charges against Mercer and his associates. The evidence was overwhelming, with financial records, witness testimony, and electronic communications creating an airtight case. In the weeks that followed, our community transformed. What had begun as a response to corruption became a blueprint for rebuilding. We drafted a new HOA charter with mandatory financial transparency, term limits, and oversight protections. Quarterly financial reviews became public, with detailed explanations of all expenditures above $1,000. When a reporter asked me if I would consider running for HOA president, I declined. Leadership should rotate among neighbors. No one person should have that much control for too long. Instead, we created a rotating council with representatives from each street, ensuring diverse perspectives would inform decisions. The first order of business was returning improperly collected fines to affected homeowners. What had begun as a personal confrontation sparked reform that spread throughout the county. The state legislature opened an investigation into predatory HOA practices that expanded to 3 surrounding counties, where similar patterns emerged. A bill was introduced requiring HOAs to adhere to strict financial transparency guidelines and limiting their ability to impose punitive fines without due process. In a twist that still makes me smile, Emma's Chicken Project won first prize at the county fair, earning her a $10,000 scholarship. Her detailed documentation of heritage breed characteristics and sustainable farming practices impressed the judges, but it was her section on community integration of agricultural projects that truly stood out. Agricultural awareness builds stronger communities, she wrote in her presentation. When people understand where their food comes from and the work involved in producing it, they develop greater respect for both the land and each other. The chickens that Mercer had tried to eliminate became symbols of resistance. Neighbors who had previously complained about occasional clucking now brought their children to learn about egg production and sustainable farming. My property, once targeted for takeover, transformed into a community gathering space. We hosted monthly cookouts where neighbors who had lived as strangers for years now gathered regularly, sharing meals and building connections. The barn that I'd built for Emma's projects became a meeting place for everything from HOA councils to children's educational programs. Most surprisingly, the lead biker, Doyle, approached me after his latest testimony. Out on bail and cooperating with authorities, he seemed a different man from the intimidating figure who had threatened my daughter. "I've been thinking about what you did," he said awkwardly, hands shoved in his pockets. "You could have hurt us that day, had every right to, but you chose justice instead of vengeance. That stayed with me." He explained that as part of his plea agreement, he needed to perform community service. "I'm good with my hands, construction, repairs, that sort of thing. Thought maybe some of the older folks around here might need help with their places while all this gets sorted out." Initially, neighbors were skeptical, but when Mrs. Abernathy's roof began leaking and Doyle showed up with tools and materials, perceptions slowly changed. He started helping elderly residents with home repairs as community service while awaiting sentencing, finding redemption through honest work. Several of my former Ranger teammates established a county-wide neighborhood watch program, training residents in security awareness and community protection, not through intimidation, but through connection and vigilance. The strongest security comes from neighbors who actually know and look out for each other, Mike Dawson explained at a training session. All the cameras and alarms in the world can't replace human connection. 6 months later, I sat in the courtroom as Mercer made his final statement before sentencing. Gone was the arrogant HOA president who had terrorized our community. In his place stood a broken man finally facing consequences. "I thought I could push around ordinary people," he admitted tearfully. "I never expected them to push back. I never expected them to stand together." The judge sentenced him to 8 years for racketeering, fraud, and criminal intimidation. His brother and 2 county officials received similar sentences. The Iron Serpents Motorcycle Club, minus Doyle and 2 others who cooperated with authorities, faced federal RICO charges that effectively disbanded their organization. The Wilsons were able to repurchase their home at the original sale price, with Meridian Properties ordered to cover all moving expenses and closing costs. Similar restitution was made to other families who had been forced out under duress. Sometimes standing your ground isn't just about protecting your family, it's about your entire community. The skills I developed in one life served justice in another when it truly mattered. Emma recently told me she's decided to study law after finishing high school. You showed me how to fight the right way, Dad, she said as we collected eggs from the chicken coop that had started it all. Not with fists, but with truth and community. If there's one thing I've learned from this experience, it's that the power of neighbors united against corruption is unstoppable. We're not just homeowners sharing property lines. We're the frontline defenders of justice in our communities. The county has implemented new regulations for HOAs, including required financial audits and limits on fining authority. Across the state, homeowners are organizing to review their own HOA practices, creating protection networks to prevent similar abuses. Before his sentencing, Doyle told me something I'll never forget. I've been afraid of men with guns and badges my whole life. You showed me that real strength isn't about intimidation. It's about using your power to protect others. He's completed his community service and, with the judge's approval, stayed in Pinecrest Estates. He now runs a small handyman service helping elderly residents maintain their homes, turning his life in a new direction. Our community transformed from disconnected strangers to an extended family. We look out for each other now, understanding that true security comes from connection, not isolation behind locked doors. The chicken coop still stands in my backyard, expanded now into a community educational project where local school children learn about sustainable agriculture. Emma's original chickens have multiplied, producing eggs that we distribute to elderly neighbors and families in need. When those bikers threatened my daughter that day, they didn't just awaken a former ranger. They awakened a community's courage. And that, my friends, is a force that can never be intimidated. Sometimes it takes confronting a threat to discover what truly matters. In my case, it wasn't just protecting my family's home. It was helping build a community worth coming home to. That's the real legacy of my military service, I've realized. Not the medals or the missions, but the understanding that true security never comes from fear or force. It comes from people standing together, looking out for one another, and refusing to be intimidated by those who would abuse their power. And those chickens that started this whole ordeal, they're still clucking happily in their coop, blissfully unaware that they helped change an entire community for the better.